His mantra was never to back down.
It'll be incumbent on me to make additional decisions in the weeks and months to come, but never will they be climb downs.
Never will they be climb downs. That was Emmanuel Macron speaking to the French community in Buenos Aires 4 days ago on the sidelines of the G20 summit. This Tuesday, different story. Never in his 18 months in power so far had the president had to back down on a reform until this Tuesday, on the heels of 2 straight weekends of rioting in the capital, Paris. Prime Minister Edouard Philippe announcing the delay of a new carbon tax on fuel. He's pushed it back from January to July, with more measures to follow, he says. Not enough, respond the yellow vests, who are still manning roadblocks across the country and who vowed to return to Paris next Saturday. So, what is the way out for Macron? The disenfranchised, who in the space of 18 days have gelled into a powerful but leaderless force, opening the question of how you save the planet without punishing the poor. In practice, will the climb down signal the death knell of the government's carbon-curbing ambitions? Today in the France 24 debate, we're going to be looking as to whether or not this is too little or too much. And with us, financial advisor and commentator, Edouard Philippe. Welcome back.
Hello, François.
Nice to see you. Welcome back as well to Laurent Jacobelli, Communications Director for Marine Le Pen's Rassemblement National Party.
Absolutely.
Welcome as well to Francesco Saracino, Senior Economist at the OFCE, the French think tank.
Bonsoir.
Thank you for being with us. And geographer Aurélien Delpirou, who lectures at the Paris School of Urban Planning, part of the University of Paris East Créteil.
Exactly.
On the eastern side of Paris.
Absolutely. Good evening.
Thank you for being with us. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. By the way, it's not just a 6-month suspension of the fuel tax hike. It's also a temporary halt and plans to tighten automobile emissions and maintenance tests, the freezing and upcoming increases in electricity costs until the month of May, and a plan to create what the government is calling a national dialogue on taxes and public spending. Most of all, the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, saying that this is a chance to listen.
The French citizens who put on a yellow vest are people who love their country. They want taxes to decrease and work to pay off. That's also what we want. These are our values. It's the heart of the president's agenda. And if I didn't successfully express this, and if the ruling party has failed to convince our compatriots, we must change something.
We must change something. Has he changed enough, Edouard Tétrault?
Well, it's the beginning of something, and we should welcome it as such. Not to pick on your words,
Pick
François,
away.
It's not about backing down. It's about making a U-turn. It's about starting to make a U-turn. And I guess for Emmanuel Macron would not be the first great president, be it a French or an American president, to start making a U-turn. At some point, reality kicks in, and you have to give away or to let on the shelf the promises of a campaign that happened already 2 years ago, and 2 years ago is a big period of time in the 21st century. You know, if you take the comparison with, say, Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton arguably was probably one of the best American presidents after World War II. Well, his first 2 years were a shame. He was unable to define a clear policy, unable to build up a strong cabinet, and it took for him a terrible defeat at the midterm elections to then become America's greatest president. Well, I suspect you only learn from your mistakes. What we have seen over the last couple of months was a mistaken analysis of what is happening in France. I think we have the potential for Emmanuel Macron to be the president we expected him to be when we pushed for his...
So several questions follow up from that.
Years ago.
The first one is Macron, who had been economy minister under the previous president, François Hollande, who backed down a lot.
Yes.
And so there's some saying that it's in opposition to Hollande, that he didn't want to be seen as weak, as backing down. But is it also because, well, he's doesn't listen or he can't hear?
Well, sometimes it takes a big noise to listen. Sometimes it takes a significant event to indeed make sure that the reality comes back on top of your agenda, and you leave more ideology-driven items. There were many at the En Marche campaign, and I think this is a promise for indeed a better governance, a better government. I think in the coming months you are going to see not only a change in methods, but a change in teams, and also possibly a change in direction of French politics. And that was, I suspect, long overdue and expected by many people who backed Emmanuel Macron 2 years ago, like me.
Francesco Saracino, do you agree that Macron now gets it? And that we can...
I would like to share your optimism, actually. Macron seems to be very much convinced that his policies are the right policies for France. And I mean, what he has been doing the past 2 years is very consistent with what he actually promised. This is something we cannot blame him for. I mean, he didn't cheat the French. He's just doing what he promised. So, and he certainly lacked attention and listening. And this is something that was clear to everybody. I mean, his arrogance has struck many commentators, even in other countries, not just here in France. The problem is, can he really change policies given this context? It's not just a question of character or of being in opposition with François Hollande, with the hesitation of François Hollande. It's a question of believing that what you're doing is the right thing for the country. To make a change in policy, you need to change your beliefs. Is he changing his beliefs because
How does he need to change his beliefs?
Well, my personal view is that he has in mind a type of society in which wealth is created by the very rich. And so his policies are really targeted towards benefiting the very rich so that then this trickles down to the rest of society. This is a theory that I think has been disproven by economists many times.
He'd of course argue saying no, it's not trickle down economics. What it is we have to arm France for the transition that's going on in the global capitalism towards the information age.
Absolutely. This is where it becomes very complicated, right? Because the measures here, the measures that are on which he's backing down now are measures that in some sense are necessary because they are necessary towards the ecological transition. It's everything else that seems to be contradictory. You cannot ask people, you cannot ask the middle class, the lower class to actually make an effort and then at the same time take away the
wealth tax.
The wealth tax. So that's the point. He should tell us whether he still believes that the best way to boost growth in France is to give more money to the very rich. I think this is where he needs to change his mind before changing policies.
Before I turn to Laurent Jacobelli and Aurélien Delpiro, let's listen to the Yellow Vests because they, for now, say it's not enough. Catherine Viette has that story.
They spent the morning glued to the radio, but the French government's decision to suspend a planned fuel tax is seen as too little too late by Yellow Vest protesters.
It's a victory, but it's not everything we expected. We know that the tax suspension is meant to pacify us, but that's not all we want.
Across France, the government's announcement has been met with suspicion by those demonstrating.
I don't know if it's a breakthrough or if it's an attempt on their part to say, if we give them a little bit, maybe they'll go home.
There are worries, too, that the fuel tax is only being suspended for 6 months. Many say they want it to be cancelled.
Don't be fooled, it's only temporary. So from this moment, if we have to put on our yellow vests in 3 months because the tax is back, well, I don't see the point of not doing things permanently and asking to take real steps, not half measures.
Many Yellow Vests say the government doesn't understand their anger and frustration. At this point, they say their demands go beyond just the fuel tax.
Fuel, fuel, fuel. That's all anybody's talking about. But it's not just that. There's also the social contribution tax, increasing the minimum wage. There's a hike in electricity, and I could go on.
The Yellow Vests remain mobilized, with many saying they plan to continue their protest.
Laurent Jacobelli, we have the surveys from the start of the week, which said that 72% of the French expressed sympathy with the movement, and 85% were aghast over the violence. Listening to what we heard there, lots of demands that go well beyond just the fuel tax. At this point in time, what should the government do?
First of all, I heard just before from you and from the other people here on the site that Mr. Macron has made an effort. He has done nothing at all, no concrete measure at all. First of all, himself didn't answer to the yellow vests. He asked Prime Minister to do it, but he was deaf and arrogant, saying, I don't have to talk to these people. Prime Minister did, and he has frozen tax rising. Frozen. It is to say that within 6 months, we will see that carbon tax is coming back.
You think it'll come back?
Of course he will. What he says to the French citizens, I know, I'm not killing you now. I will kill you within 6 months. He doesn't understand the major crisis he has to face. French people are fed up seeing that purchasing power decreasing. They are fed up, these working people, paying taxes people, they are fed up to pay for others and getting always less. You talked about wealth tax, 4.5 billion euros. We, working citizens, have to pay. Migrants, tens and tens billions of euros to make them free care.
So okay, so the two
and everything.
It was 2 billion euros was expected from this increase in diesel and unleaded taxes. Where do you get the 2 billion euros now?
What you should know is that it's only 20% of the so-called carbon tax and is only dedicated to ecologic transition. So you have to know that. So we are not talking about saving the planet at all. We are talking about increasing taxes. And French people are fed up with that. You ask me, what should the government do? It should stop taxing people, leaving them alone, leaving them earning money.
So how do you then plug the hole in the budget deficit?
First of all, you have to dedicate all the budget to the French citizens. It's impossible and unbearable for the middle class and working class to pay always more and to get always less. Less hospitals, less policemen, less schools. And in the same time, you welcome migrants, you pay them all. And you talk to wealthy people and say, don't worry, you will pay less taxes. It's unfair and it's unbearable. We can do savings by targeting our budget to the needs of the French citizens, and only that.
All right, immigrants, we can argue about this, who are net contributors rather than a net burden when it comes to the overall economy.
You obviously know it's wrong.
Well, it's according to the OECD, not me. Aurélien Delpiro,
and all the serious surveys made by researchers from social sciences.
Let me ask you, Aurélien Delpiro, it's been 3 weeks, 18 days. We're still actually arguing over who are the yellow vests. You, as a geographer, as somebody who looks at the urban planning, is this a kind of a class/tribal warfare that we're witnessing between those who that live in those urban centers and those who live far from the city lights?
Actually, the yellow vest protestation started in Île-de-France.
In the Paris area.
Exactly, in the Paris area. And people from the urban Paris region, if you take the time budget, they spend a lot of time, of energy and money also in car use. So I think it's quite interesting to have this in mind. But before, I would like to say that after 3 weeks, everyone should show humility and responsibility toward this movement. Humility because, just as you said, it's very difficult still to know who are the Gilets jaunes, what are the roots, the stakes, the reasons of the movement. Why? Because precisely it is very diverse, socially, spatially, and even if the mobilization is not so massive, we can see by the surveys that it is deeply rooted in the French society. And on the other hand, responsibility, because the risk is to divide this country. That's why I don't agree and I don't share, like very caricatural interpretations in terms of countrysides against cities, or inner cities against suburbs.
You've co-authored an opinion piece in Le Monde where you say the worst thing the government could do right now is announce corporatist measures for different segments of the population. You need a more holistic approach to all this.
Exactly. And I was speaking of territorial categories. We are still thinking with categories from the past. In France, medium-sized cities, little villages. But the globalization has changed everything. And I know it's tough. It's tough for everyone. It's tough for the people, for the territories, also for the politician. But we can't build a response based on categories from another time, another period.
Edouard Tétrault, if you look at the data from the 2017 election, a lot of people voted for Emmanuel Macron in these areas that seem forlorn. Is he losing those people with this?
I think this is what sorry for the free ad, but this is what I pushed in Le Figaro this morning.
In your column.
I supported his candidature actively because 2 years ago he was the candidate of hope, of benevolence, of recreating unity in a country that has the genius to self-divide, notably when you have big challenges. And to cut a long story short, significant mistakes, significant even mistakes in terms of judgment have been made over the past months. He needs to come back to his initial promise. If he is to save, I'm speaking in grave terms here, but if he is to save his presidency, if he is to make sense of the promise he gave us 2 years ago, he needs to come back to that.
He needs to come back to that.
Look at the polls.
Edouard, I'm going to have to interrupt you just briefly because we have to take a very quick break. We're going to pick up on that point when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. We're discussing the first major climb down since Emmanuel Macron became president of France 18 months ago, the suspension of a fuel tax that had sparked 2 Saturdays of rioting here in Paris and roadblocks across the country for the past 18 days. We're doing so in the company of financial advisor and commentator Edouard Tétrault, whose next column is in Wednesday's edition of French daily newspaper Les Échos. Les Échos. Also with us as well is Laurent Jacobelli of what used to be the National Front and is now again Le Renouveau National.
No, it's
Rassemblement.
National Rally.
National Rally. Okay, the National Rally in English. Francesco Saracino, senior economist at the OFCE think tank. And we're joined by Aurélien Delpirou, who teaches urban planning at the University of Paris East Créteil. We were discussing before the break that it's not enough for the yellow vests. So what happens if they march? How hard a crackdown if there's violence? Solange Mougin follows up on the hundreds of arrests from Saturday's rioting in Paris.
Going before a judge to be sentenced. One after another, these individuals arrested over the weekend's yellow vest protests in Paris went before magistrates for small crimes and misdemeanors. The 5 Paris courtrooms were packed for much of the day. For in total, police arrested 412 people on Saturday. and 73 of them went before the judges Monday for minor offenses. Most of the accused have never been arrested before. Their families came to lend moral support.
They found a small rock about this size. It wasn't that small a rock, which made the lawyer chuckle. My son happened to be there, and the police cast a net and reeled everyone in.
He doesn't belong here. He has no place in this.
The majority of the accused are men, aging between 20 and 50. Most were arrested during the protests with masks, rocks, or firecrackers, but few were caught in the act. Some were let off because of a lack of proof. Others were given warnings, and some prison terms, ranging from 3 to 8 months with parole. Nearly all do not fit the typical profile of a violent rioter.
The profile of the people here do not have any prior records. They did not necessarily participate in previous protests. They're people who have jobs and have come from across France.
Other cases are still to come, for over 100 detentions have been prolonged as police investigate. Those are for more violent crimes, stealing a police weapon or vandalizing Paris's Arc de Triomphe.
Edouard Philippe, France 24's teams who were out and about on Saturday witnessed, yes, there were radicals. Yes, there may have been agents provocateurs, as we call them here, inciting. But a lot of people got caught up in the moment, and they were actually yellow vests who did take part, for the most part, in the acts of violence. It's a tricky one. How does the justice system handle these people?
I'm not a judge, but I think what is interesting with this fact is that indeed we are, and it shows, it gives a reason for the tremendous support of the French people, despite the violences, for what this movement represents. Because we can relate. Everybody in France can relate to these people. It's about people who have jobs, but it's about people who have jobs that do not pay enough. So we have clearly, it's not only, forget about carbon tax. It will be dealt with. It's more profound than that. It's about, are we living in a country where we have a social and economic model that gives not only opportunities, but the means to live a decent life for you or your children in this society. So my point is, from a very minor thing, which is carbon tax, which was indeed, it was not a lie, but almost a lie. French carbon tax will not save the planet. It triggered something very deep that creates for the French executive the occasion of a full reset and indeed reinventing a French model. The thing is, it's
reinventing the French model
at full speed.
Aurélien Delpirou.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to react about the violences. I'm not a specialist, but everyone talked about Paris. Obviously, it was very impressive. But there were violences in Bordeaux, Nice, Montpellier, Toulouse, so-called very dynamic regional metropolises. So there were violences everywhere, and even in Le Puy-en-Velay, the city from the national leader of the opposition, Laurent Wauquiez, where they burn the prefecture.
They burn the prefecture, the state superintendent's
exactly,
office.
Which is a symbol of the state.
This Tuesday.
Which means that it's not only about, black blocs.
Okay, so explain this to our viewers, because they're watching these images and they're thinking, oh, this is France. This is playing to stereotypes. Explain what is the violence about?
Honestly, I'm not a specialist of the violence, but I think the violence, more or less, is a symbol of the state level of rage against a system, and which is profoundly unequal and selective. And I had to say that I read Le Monde yesterday, and it was written, the power is like abasourdi, amazed by the violences and all the protests, the riots. But, excuse me, but did Emmanuel Macron take into account is discovering just now that globalization is producing that kind of inequalities. That globalization is not just like a magic tool with redistribution, social and spatial.
Well, he addressed that on the campaign trail, but since he's become president, perhaps a different story. Laurent Jacobetti, on the point of the violence, some people are saying, yes, you can block fuel depots, but if you don't smash the shop windows on the Champs-Élysées, you don't get anybody's attention. And then others saying, well, that we're condoning violence, and that whereas we didn't in the past. The same people who are now in opposition are now condoning are saying, yes, we have to be understanding, whereas before they would have touted a harder line.
First of all, we have to be very clear and condemn all kind of violence. To be clear, and breaking shop windows is not a solution. But in the same time, we have to understand why these people express their anger. First of all, because they have no other way to do. They have a parliament that is not representative at all because of the...
They were elected, the people who
Yes,
were there.
they did, but as
the vote wasn't rigged?
As we don't have the proportional ballot voting, it means that opposition, for instance, is not really represented in the parliament. So it's a way to say we are angry. But what also is violent is working every day of the month, and at the end of the month, not making sure to make ends meet and to give food to his children. That's violent. It's violent to have worked all his life, and at the end, when you are pensioner, you see that your purchasing power is decreasing. That's violent. Yes, Mr. Macron's government is violent to the middle class and working class. And we have to change that. We have to change this globalization system. We are not a startup nation. We are the French nation. And as long as each and every French has not all the means to fulfill his ambition within his own country, there is a big issue. And Mr. Macron doesn't understand that at all.
France is not a startup nation. Francesco Saracino, you agree?
I mean, I agree on almost everything that has been said. It's just that none of us, I think, has the solution to these problems. I don't believe for once that the solution is closing the borders and becoming...
Controlling the border is not closing. Do you prefer putting all the jobs in China?
I do believe that that globalization has overall brought great benefits to the world societies. The problem is the distribution of these gains.
Exactly.
And so the issue here, I don't think that is the solution. This is why I have lots of questions on where this movement will go, because it risks actually going in that direction. I'm Italian, and so we all know what's happening in Italy. I don't think that any of the things that the Italian government is doing right now will bring Italy closer to what it used to be. So that is not the issue.
We'll see.
The problem is that...
But a big portion of what's going on in Italy is an anti-tax sentiment.
Actually, it's a very similar movement. It just took a different form, and it's... But it's the same thing as the Brexit vote. It's the same thing as Trump in the United States. It's the same middle and lower class unhappiness about how the elites have been ruling the world in the past 20 years. Does it mean that we have to go back to nationalism? No, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I do think that we should... I really think that we should find a way, which honestly I don't have a ready-made solution. We should find a way to better govern globalization. It has happened in the past. It worked in the past. We had 30
this moment
years.
Has passed.
Please.
We have 30 years of strong growth, strong redistribution, increasing the welfare state coverage, and opening of our societies. Going back to closed societies, whatever the declination of this is not the answer.
No, please.
Which doesn't mean I have the answer on how to make global societies more equal. That is
please, some good sense. We are talking about two things. First of all, working people who are poor and we have less money at the end of the month. And we are talking about saving the planet. Globalization is the reason why the two phenomena exist. If, for instance, you do produce and consume with short circuits, it is to say you have a farmer at the corner of the street and you buy your vegetables by him. First of all, you create jobs within your country. The second point is you don't use fuel for cargoes or planes coming from China or from Canada or from anywhere else at the end of the opposite of the world, and you have a better planet. So this is a kind of solution. You don't want to study it. It's your responsibility. We want to give jobs to our people.
These solutions are already studied. That is absolutely not true. These solutions are studied, and this is not about circuit court and so on. Obviously, everyone is working on this, so this is not a kind of, innovation. The problem is
you are very sure of yourself.
You can say. I think this is so demagogic to say.
No,
we are against globalization. Yes, okay. I am against war. I am against everything. No, globalization.
That's why you don't do politics. You do surveys. You're an intellectual.
Globalization
I do
is
act
here,
for my people.
and we have to make it with everyone. We have to make it more equal.
All right,
that is the main
with
problem.
China's children working for $1 a month,
Edouard Tétrault.
you will never have
Edouard Tétrault, let me ask you.
I think
where does this leave the energy transition? Was it wrong-headed to think that it was through taxes that you could impose it? Because Emmanuel Macron's not the first, by the way. Barack Obama said the only way we're gonna reduce our fossil fuel dependency is when the price of a gallon of gas is $4. Is what
I get your question. The punitive ecology is almost an oxymoron. Fiscalité écologique, taxation, a better planet through taxation is almost an oxymoron. You can do an ecology incitative. You can give incentives for to have a less polluted atmosphere, etc. But obviously, it was wrong from the start to jump in the debate and give. I don't know if it's a measure, but we are just witness today of the failure of the idea that if our European countries are together, we are better protected, stronger, blah blah blah. France and Germany have just tried to push. France has just tried to push very hard Germany and the other members of the EU to tax the GAFA, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, who indeed clearly evaporate our wealth, our jobs, and with a very little contribution to our tax system, to the countries which, in a way, they on which they extract taxes. If you take a reasonable tax on GAFA, which is needed, you more than cover this very silly carbon tax. Yes, frontiers exist. Yes, frontiers need to be controlled. It's not about closing borders, but it's about controlling them. We are currently, we see I was a big proponent and supporter of a more united Europe only a few years ago. We see this promise, this dream unravel in front of our eyes. Do we continue to believe in a dream that has passed, or do we take reality as it is? Reality kicks in. It is, I think, a historic moment that either you seize it and you...
All right, so how do you seize it? In this particular case, you're talking about taxing transactions over the internet? Is that what you're saying? The stuff that you haven't bought at the store in Paris for the Christmas shopping season?
The moment Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and the others start to pay their taxes, all their taxes, VAT, impôt sur les sociétés, like any responsible company would do in an open market, then you start to make changes. And when you see that Germany is not only unable to do it, but has made sure that it does not happen, well, you can forget about a European Union. This is a very serious matter. Either we are able to unite and tax reasonably but efficiently people who use our markets, our countries, or you can forget about the European dream. You can forget about it.
The end of carbon taxes, is that what we've witnessed today? The death of the carbon tax?
No.
I think, I mean, we could spend a whole new emission discussing what is the best way, a new show, sorry, of emissions, carbon emissions, how to curb emissions. So it's of course it's a very difficult topic. Carbon taxes are by many not considered to be the most efficient way to do it. Some people say that you should have quotas on emissions and trade permits. So there is a whole literature and also a whole set of applications. So it's not a scandal if that tax never comes back, actually. But I repeat, the problem here is not that tax. The problem is that the French people have been caught into a mechanism in which the many paid for the few. And this is unacceptable in modern societies. But I also repeat, it's not by I mean, what do you do? So Europe doesn't tax the Amazon. What do? You close Amazon in France?
No,
but I mean, you need to have some. You need to have
be sensible. We have sovereignty on our tax system here in France. You have sovereignty on your tax system in Italy, in Germany. You will apply national taxes where needed. And if Europe is unable to create a cohesion, to have a united tax policy on such a simple matter, well then each nation will do it on its own. I regret it, but this is reality.
Yes, please, two facts quickly, and I'm sorry for my English, which is very poor tonight.
No,
The first one, no one. I was in Limoges this weekend.
Limoges in the center of France.
In the south of France, center of France. Inside the Gilets jaunes protestation, no one speaks or talks about frontier, migration, cultural insecurity.
Wrong idea.
All the revocations are about.
You know everything about everything.
Fiscal justice.
I was with
fiscal justice.
And
please, let me talk. Fiscal tax. Okay, tax, and I agree totally with what was said, and social and economic justice. So it's clear that all the revendications are converging now towards a need of regulation, a need more state, more regulation, but not closing the frontier or creating a so-called, idealized French identity. This is absolutely out of
Do you
subject.
say that French identity doesn't exist?
Second fact, 2/3 of the poorest household in France, 2/3 of the poorest live in the inner cities. So let's stop saying that this movement is coming from the poor, abandoned citizen from the countryside. The poverty is within our urbanized spaces. And the third one about Italy, what you said. Okay, for Cinque Stelle, 5 stars movement, but the League, where the League is strong. The League is strong is in medium-sized cities of the north, which is the wealthiest part of the population. What I want to say is that kind of protestation is not only about, being part of the working class. It's more than that. It's a crisis of the democratic representation, and it's a crisis of how the globalization impacts concretely our quotidian lives.
And the people that you spoke with in Limoges, in the center of France, when you say the word globalization to them, what do they say?
They say, we are all aware we have to make effort to adapt. But what we don't accept and what we will never accept is that this government, like the others, always ask the same people to make the most efforts. And tax is an example of that,
As Francesco was saying, we could talk about it for an entire other show. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to thank Aurélien Delpiro, Laurent Jacobelli. I want to thank as well Edouard Tétrault, Francesco Saracino. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. Encore 2 minutes. And we say hello to James Creedon.
Hi, Francois. A quick look at some of the reactions online to today's developments when it comes to the Gilets jaunes movement. The moratorium does not seem to have convinced many online, at least those who are a part of the movement or support the movement. You can see some images like this where basically laughter is the reaction. Another one here holding a hand up with the yellow jacket being hoisted in the air. We will not give in. Nous ne céderons pas is the line there. Various different personalities emerging around the country as well in what was a kind of a leaderless movement, and leaders beginning to emerge. One called Johnny Toulouse, which is, he's quite a personality in the south of France. He's saying, c'est du pipeau. This is utter rubbish, or it's empty. So that seems to, he by the way, met with Christian Estrosi, the mayor of Nice, today. So politicians trying as well to reach out to the movement, even if they're not in the government. BFM TV, the rolling news channel, interviewed various other members of the Gilets Jaunes who were equally circumspect, such as Christophe Chalençon, who has been speaking out quite a bit. He's a fan of Pierre de Villiers. He would like to see the former chief of staff of the army as a new president. And he's saying, look, it's not, these measures are not going to make people go back to their homes. Elsewhere,
we heard, by the way, Tuesday morning, the one of the former leaders of the May 68 protests saying we were trying to get rid of a general, not bring one.
Right. So there's a sense now that there's people are, well, I suppose there's a seeking out of leadership in some ways. Here also, Benjamin Cauchy, another Gilets Jaunes, saying we are not going to be happy with crumbs. We want basically the whole baguette. In other words, the ambitions of the movement have grown. We want more concrete gestures. So you can see it's really across the board. The measures that were proposed by the government, a moratorium, a 6-month sort of delay, if you like, on bringing the fuel tax in. It's just not going to silence the demands of the Gilets Jaunes. On Facebook as well, that's what they're saying here in French. A moratorium is simply a delay on the taxes until the 1st of April. 1st of April, of course, being April Fool's Day. LOL. In other words, this is a total and utter joke. Now, to move to political reactions, Marine Le Pen, obviously other politicians maybe taking advantage of the movement as well to seek to weaken the government. Certainly, Marine Le Pen is saying that this is absolutely unacceptable in terms of the expectations of the movement. You have Bernard Cazeneuve, the former Prime Minister. He actually cautioned against politicians seeking to take advantage of the chaos for political ends, but he did have this to say, which made it into the headline. A spitefulness or a feeling of spitefulness can only create more spitefulness in return, which I think is a reference to the now infamous charge of arrogance at Emmanuel Macron.
Leveled against the president, yeah.
Ségolène Royal, former ecology minister, she pointed out, I suppose, what is one of the chief criticisms of the Gilets Jaunes, that the fortune tax was done away with by Emmanuel Macron. No one can quantify whether or not any of that money came back into the economy. And here you have, I suppose, taxes then being put on I suppose, the most modest, as she is putting it, or the poorest in society. So really, that is something that is difficult, it seems, for the government right now to defend. And even if figures like Ségolène Royal are pointing that out, it shows the extent to which people really view it as one of the major elements that is kind of giving fuel, if you like, to the movement. This is an Irish economics professor who shared an article from The Guardian going back a couple of years, but he sees it as kind of an explainer of the reason behind the yellow vest. It's an echo of what Ségolène Royal was saying. As inequality soars, the nervous super rich are already planning their escapes. This was around the time of the Occupy movement. And what this article was pointing out is that some of the super rich are actually afraid of a potential uprising coming down the tracks and have been buying, islands and airstrips and whatnot out of a fear that there could be some sort of mass revolt.
Really rich survivalists.
That's right, but certainly people bothered by that. Lots more to say in it. New York Times reporting as well on, I suppose, a real sense of people suffering from poverty and not being able to reach the end of the month, and that's really what's being expressed, I think, through the Gilets Jaunes movement.
All right, many thanks, James Creedon. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here. By the way, more coverage on our new and updated website, France24.com. Stay with us.